Thanks for clicking! The Toronto Regional Real Estate Board has just released its data for the month of March, showing a real estate market rebound that may have stalled, or, as the media puts it, just about to take off. Yet, a closer look at the data shows that the market is shifting in favor of that of the buyer, with an increase in listings and a decrease in sales.
This is the worst!
Fear not though, Bloomberg had Jason Mercer, Chief Market Analyst at the TRREB, on their show, asking the tough questions on the state of the real estate market.
Are you free for dinner tonight?
Given that the media is portraying a real estate market that is going to be a tough one for homebuyers, as we'll see today, the data does seem to fly in the face of that narrative. So what I want to do today is go over Toronto's real estate data for the month of March, take a look at the shift towards that of a buyer's market, discuss Jason Mercer's interview with Bloomberg, and then go over some implications for the spring market. Speaking of implications for the spring market, the Bank of Canada is set to make its policy announcement next week on April 10th and have its press conference soon thereafter, and we'll obviously have an update out on both on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, let's get into this data. Onto the data. First up, the benchmark price. The benchmark price, that's the price of a home that represents the most popular set of features, and the benchmark was up in March. The benchmark in February was $1,093,900, and that jumped about $20,000 to $1,113,600 in March. So that's about a $20,000 increase in the benchmark price in March, but the benchmark is still down about $5,000 from this point in time last year, back when the usual suspects were telling us to expect big price gains by the end of the year, with the human incarnation of a crystal ball himself, Phil Soper, saying that home buyers were yelling hip hip hooray on stable interest rates.
They let that kid say anything.
Regardless, the average price was also up in March. The average price in February was sitting at $1,108,720 and jumped about $13,000 to $1,021,615. So that's an average price up about $13,000 since February and up about $5,000 since this point in time last year. And the median price was up as well, though by not nearly as much. The median price, if you'll remember, that's where half as many homes sell over that price and half as many sell under that price. The median price in February was $970,000. And that increased about $7,000 to $977,297. So that's about a $7,000 increase in the median price in March, up about $12,000 since this point in time in 2023. So we have modest increases in the benchmark average and median price, but when we look at the inventory, we can see that more homes are coming to the market relative to that of demand. When we look at the months of inventory measurement, the MOI, which measures if no more homes came to market, how long would it take for Toronto to completely run out of homes for sale, the MOI in February was sitting at 2.4, and that was up to 2.5 in March. And finally, the sales to list price ratio, the SLPR, which measures by how much over or under asking a home sells. So if a home is listed for $100,000 and sells for $102,000, the SLPR would be 102. The SLPR was up in March, sitting at 101 in February, and bumping up a little bit to 102 in March. So we have the benchmark price up $20,000, we have the average price up about $13,000, we have the median price up about $7,000, we have relatively more inventory coming to the market, and homes are going for a bit more over asking than they were last month. With that said, take the SLPR measurement with a grain of salt, as we've talked about so many times on this channel. Anyone can list a house for well under market pricing and induce a bidding war.
And that's a skill.
No, it's not. With all of that said, the real story is the amount of inventory coming to the Toronto market, especially relative to that of demand. Sales were down 4.5% in March of this year, while new listings were up 15.1% and active listings were up 23.1%. So, in terms of supply and demand, especially compared to that of last year, Toronto is moving more towards the favor of the buyer, an increase in supply and a decrease in demand.
Don't get cocky, you ain't home free yet.
Well, let's take a look at the sales to new listings ratio, which compares how many homes came to the market versus how many homes were sold. According to the Bank of Canada, a sales to new listing ratio between 40 and 60 is indicative of a balanced market. In contrast, when that number is lower, moving closer to that of 40, that's indicative of a market moving towards the favor of the buyer. Last month, the SNLR was 46.6, and this month that number was 45.8. by definition, a market that is moving more towards the favor of the home buyer. In fact, this is the lowest SNLR that Toronto has seen in the past 10 years, meaning that, for over the past decade, buyers have never had so much power, so much leverage, so much choice.
You don't know nothing.
So, if there are bidding wars going on in Toronto, and the news media tells us ad nauseum that there is, then it's probably due to the deliberate underpricing of homes, as there has never been so much inventory available in the market relative to that of demand than there has been for the past 10 years. But, says Jason Mercer of the TRREB, we are seeing an increase in demand.
And so we have started to see, a moderate uptick in the demand for ownership housing.
Except that we didn't see an increase in sales. In fact, as we discussed earlier, sales were down 4.5% from this point in time last year. So Mercer must be talking about the increase in the month-over-month sales numbers, seemingly arguing that an increase in the sales numbers from February to March is of particular note, except an increase in sales in March is especially not noteworthy. In fact, except for March of 2020, which is an outlier for obvious reasons, this is the smallest month-over-month increase in the number of sales that Toronto has seen for the past 10 years. So, if the Toronto market is expected to heat up, we have the least amount of evidence pointing to that being the case that we've had for the past 10 years.
But so what?
Well, the TRREB is making the case that prices are going to take off later on in the year. Yet, given the shift in supply and demand, it's not clear from where the TRREB is basing its assertions. The data certainly doesn't tell us that there has been a shift in demand relative to supply. In fact, it tells us otherwise. In fact, the only real evidence being provided by the TRREB that we could see a major increase in prices later on in the year is that we're going to see lower borrowing costs later on in the year. And if all this sounds familiar, it should, as Mercer, last year, amid all of the uncertainty, SVB, etc., said that that same uncertainty had and would continue to result in lower fixed borrowing costs that year. Bond yields jumped up another 140 basis points thereafter, taking mortgage rates along with them, and, as we saw, prices plunged. And I bring up Mercer's comments from last year as we're seeing a remarkable level of certainty coming from the real estate boards in a very uncertain environment. Bond yields have been surging over the past week, and the TREB is making the assertion that lower borrowing costs will help increase demand. Not could help, not might help, but will help. An incredible level of certainty reminiscent to that of last year's, when that certainty didn't exactly pan out. Rates could stay low, inflation might be beat, but that's not what the data is telling us, and that's definitely not what we're seeing coming out of the United States. Yet the real estate boards continue to demonstrate an incredible level of certainty in a very uncertain time, when there's very little data available to back up that confidence.
Evidence, Jim. Evidence.
So, take all of these predictions for major price increases amid lower borrowing costs with a grain of salt. We've been here before, and chances are we'll be here again. But one thing is certain is that what all of this data does tell us is that the Toronto market, in March at least, moved towards the favor of the buyer, with a lower SNLR than we had in February and the lowest SNLR that we've had for the past 10 years. What this means is that buyers have much more power when negotiating. Buyers can and should have finance conditions. If your real estate agent, if your realtor doesn't want you to have a finance condition because of the bidding wars, get a new realtor. With that said, we will continue to track the Toronto real estate market on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates. But for now, thanks so much for watching.